Hey, what's up? We are very excited to be bringing you another edition of That 90s Baseball Pod powered by Access Twins. I'm your host, Brandon Warren, and you can find me on Twitter at Brandon_WARNE. Across the screen from me is Mr. Gregg Olson. Greg, how are we doing today?
I'm good, Brandon. We're excited. Got our first Hall of Famer.
Yes, we have one of the top three managers of the Twins that I ever covered, and it's Mr. Paul Molitor. How are we doing?
Gentlemen, thanks for having me on today. And I'm glad to be on that short list in some way. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's probably not high on the list of career accolades. I only covered three managers. But yeah, we're very excited to have you on the program. And we got a lot of ground to cover and not a lot of time. How are things for you? What are you up to?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. I'm staying busy. It's been a tough winter up here in Minnesota, obviously, but I still got two teenagers that I have to deal with. My freshman son is involved with basketball this winter, so I've been checking out a lot of those games. And I'm still hoping to be involved with the game whenever we get back on the field in some capacity. The Twins were nice enough to bring me back last year. I was able to spend some time in some of the affiliates throughout the course of the summer, and we'll see if something like that lies in store as we move forward.
Well, let's hope so. Yeah, I like that they moved some of the operations. Wichita's a little closer than Pensacola. It's a little closer than Chattanooga. Did you spend much time in Wichita?
I got down there for a couple stints. Beautiful ballpark. They call them the wind surge appropriately because it's hot and it's blowing. And thankfully for the hitters, most time it's blowing out. But I had a couple of good trips down there. Got to Cedar Rapids. Of course, I got over to St. Paul for maybe a dozen games or so, roughly.
Right.
But it is set up nicely, and I like the change they made in switching the low A and high A between Florida and the Midwest League. It makes a lot more sense to have the higher league up here in the Midwest.
Yeah. Before I let Greg chime in here, what do you think of that affiliation between St. Paul and the Twins? Because obviously people talked about it, and it never seemed that likely because the adding and subtracting minor league teams is complicated.
Right.
But again, obviously you have St. Paul in your blood, you're Twin and all that. What did you think of the switch in affiliation?
Well, on the surface, it just makes so much sense. Just the accessibility of players when they get called up. Again, the facility's nice. I think they're going to upgrade some of the behind the scene things, locker rooms and things like that as they continue their relationship. But the Saints have such a history up here in Minnesota, and they still had a pretty good following. I think everyone's still at AAA getting used to some of the gimmicky things that the Saints do to make their product entertaining. But overall, with Gardy at the helm over there, they had a nice season, and I think it's going to bode well for the Twins in that relationship moving forward.
Yeah, it feels like somewhere Boston gets that long-term with Pawtucket. You got the Cubs with Iowa. It seems like something that can really stick. Greg, what you got?
No, I'm just I'm listening. I'm thankful that you're still involved in the game, Paul, because it seems like the game's kind of moving away from the old guys staying around and passing along their knowledge. And you is arguably one of the greatest hitters of all time. I mean, ninth on the hits list, which is unbelievable. Without me, you'd probably be about 10th or 11th. I'm curious. I hope that you're involved in the hitting aspect because you were about the flattest plane swing, long through the zone, impossible to get out. Are you still involved in the hitting aspect?
Yeah, I was last year in some degree. My role changed a little bit from back in the day when I was strictly a coordinator, and focusing on base running and defensive infield play. I had more freedom last year to kind of just interject wherever I felt appropriate. So I did spend a lot of time in the cages, watching guys, making suggestions. Interesting to have conversations with younger players now and what they feel they need to do to increase their chances of climbing the ladder. They practiced hitting differently now. We all know so much more emphasis on, launch angle and how hard you hit the ball. And some of it makes sense to me. In some ways, I still think that, like you mentioned, Greg, there needs to be a blend. The one thing that I don't like about how we develop hitters now is there's not a lot of efficiency involved. It's just more about the major damage, willingness to give up at bats in some ways, just for that one chance you might get a pitch that you could elevate and maybe hit in the gap or over the fence. I still know, just managing not that long ago, you want to have guys that can take those at bats, and there's an art to being able to get a single. And sometimes that's going to be valuable in winning and losing as well.
Totally agree. I wanted to get to, you got drafted in 74 by the Cardinals, I believe, as a pitcher.
Not necessarily. I was a pretty good two-way player in baseball. I had a nice high school pitching career like a lot of guys do. But I think the Cardinals were focused on potentially having me be an offensive player. And as it turned out, I really considered starting my professional career way back there at coming out of high school, but ended up getting an opportunity to go to the University of Minnesota on a scholarship and play for that program. And being a 26th round pick coming out of high school, I didn't have a lot of leverage. So I went the college route, and it turned out to be a good decision in the long run. I got the education background as well as having a chance to go in a much higher position 3 years later.
Now, you mentioned being a manager not that long ago. I got to ask you, what was the Eduardo Escobar experience like?
I'm not sure what the basis of that is, but
he's my guy. I love him.
Yeah, Esco, man, he just he kept finding a way to be a big time player for me. And the hard part was that every year I'd go to spring training out of the 4 years I managed it. I'd have to tell him that as of now, he didn't really have a starting role, but just to trust me that I would get him opportunities to play. And then every year he'd end up getting plenty of at-bats, plenty of games, move him around. His versatility, man, he really has developed into a pretty outstanding offensive player the last few years, Arizona, and some of the things he did. Now he's got a new home this year. But yeah, and not to mention just his personality, very unselfish, knows how to laugh, make other people laugh. He might not remember your name from one day to the next, but he was a great guy to have in that clubhouse.
Yeah, I had to do that as a brief aside because he's one of my all-time favorites. I was doing a list of my favorite people to talk to in the game over the years that I covered you guys, and let me just say he's very high on the list. You did talk about, though, Minnesota. What's your level of involvement with Minnesota right now in baseball? Are you doing much? Are you hanging around there at all?
Yeah, I was really glad that, getting through the pandemic and everything, no minor leagues that 1 year, and it kind of slowed my ability to return in any capacity with the Twins. But we, through a lot of discussions last winter, I was able to come to a place where they were happy to bring me on board, and we found a nice little niche and gave me a chance to be around the game, which I still enjoy doing. On a personal level, having a son that likes the game, loves to play. I'm able to spend time around his team and help out some of the coaching with his team when I get a chance to do that too. And I like the amateur baseball side of things when the game's still relatively pure. So baseball is still a big part of my life, and hopefully it will be for a long time.
And the Gophers too. Are you involved with them at all?
Appreciate you mentioning that. The coach at the University of Minnesota, Gregg, is an old teammate of mine. He's been there for, I don't know, almost 40 years now, or whatever it is. And I do keep my connection to the university program, follow them, try to get down there when I get a chance to see some games. And, it's really tough to compete for these northern schools with some of the powerhouses throughout the South. But they find a way to stay competitive every year. And I give my friend John a lot of credit for that.
Very good. No, I appreciate you staying in the game, man. Your skill level and your knowledge are bar none, and would hate to see you not being around and helping and coaching.
I'll follow up on what you said earlier too, Gregg. Not just speaking of myself, but in general, I just think that we do need to maybe strike a little bit better balance. We've certainly learned a lot about how to measure performance and win probability and all those things. And when I was managing, there was such a tremendous influx in that type of data, and you try to respect it and take it into your consideration. But as everybody knows, you're still dealing with human beings and people that you can trust in certain situations just because of their makeup and different things like that. And so I do think we need to balance the human side with the analytical side, as well as the fact that there was a lot of things that players did in the game in previous decades or previous generations that in some ways still can enhance the game that we're trying to play today and finding ways to win. And my other concern along those lines is that as analytics have become more of the guide that clubs use, it's become a little bit less of an entertaining game in my mind. And it's just as far as action is not as frequent, base running is not as prevalent as far as one of the ingredients that makes a team potentially dangerous in a postseason. We've just kind of changed not only how we play it, but therefore it makes it a different game to observe for the fans.
I always found it, I do find it fascinating. We get to the playoffs and all of a sudden baseball comes back. You see guys with 2-strike approaches going, Bellinger going the other way, hitting through the shift. And
right.
Now all of a sudden the stolen base comes back and I'm going, okay, so when the game's at the most heightened time,
right,
we go back to the way baseball was. But for 162 games, it's not worth stealing bases. And you having over 500 stolen bases, I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Well, I think that's a very valid observation. I do think that the postseason does bring back some of those things that we lose throughout the course of the 162 game schedule. Whether it's hitting through the shift or, guys trying to bunt against the shift, looking for opportunities to pick up 90 feet. The stolen base, we never really had a chance to measure it all that much in terms of how many more runs it created, depending on your success rate. But we've obviously shifted to where it's not so much risk reward with stolen bases or other aggressive base running plays. It's more about the risk. They forget about the reward. It's just, we got 27 outs and we want to use them all in the batter's box as best as we can. And so they really try to minimize taking away any outs in base running situations. I still think it should play a part. Obviously you got to play smart as the home runs have increased. And, a lot of teams say that, the guy on first has as good a chance to score in today's game as the guy on second, just because of the increase in the doubles and the home runs.
You guys talking about stolen bases, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up a guy you managed and his recent big contract extension. What have you seen? What do you think about Byron Buxton these days? Because I tell you what, he's looking like, if he can stay healthy, a bona fide superstar. And yet there is that balance too of, if you have him on the bases, you want to take that extra base, but you don't want to lose him on the bases, all that. Just when you watch him play now, how do you feel as far as how his evolution has gone? Because he really is a treat from my point of view.
Yeah, I can get long-winded in an answer, Byron. I mean, having a chance to be a part of the group of people that try to help develop him through our system and then see him, finally get to the major leagues and excel. We all know the challenge for Byron has been able to find ways to stay on the field. I was one of the, many Twins fans that was tremendously elated that they found a way to compromise and keep him around here. It was one of those situations, I think Byron would acknowledge, that very rarely has a guy, reached his free agent status, not had a real long resume in terms of games played, and he still had a tremendous amount of leverage, which speaks to his, just his high-end ability to impact a game in so many ways. So one of my favorite people, just always respectful. And I just couldn't be pulling for a guy more than I pull for him. And really, he's going to be the cornerstone of the Twins getting back in a competitive situation. And I think you might have heard me share the story. I don't talk to players a lot that I either coach or manage much about my career. But last summer, when I did talk to Byron and I felt that, another bout with not playing and injuries, I did share with him about how many times personally that I missed games as a younger player, and that for whatever reason, I had really, really good health in my 30s and not so good in my 20s. just to try to plant a positive seed for him that it could be at any point where this thing turns around and all of a sudden you find yourself playing 150 to 100 games every year.
Now, as someone who's worked in player development in some form or fashion with the Twins all over the place, it feels like they kind of have an affinity for those guys. I mean, I know the faces have changed in the front office, but you go back to Torrey Hunter, you got a toolsy outfielder who needed time. Aaron Hicks, toolsy outfielder, needed time. Obviously you managed Hicks for a minute there, I think. Or did you miss out on him? I can't remember. I think you had him for a year.
Yeah, he was there, I think 15 maybe before.
Yeah. So, but I mean, you would have seen him in development, I'm sure, at some point. It just seems like the Twins have a type as far as those toolsy, fast athletes that they can play ball, but they're going to probably try to turn them into something more. Akil Baddoo, another one who comes to mind.
Yeah, well, not keeping Baddoo around last year and him having a breakout season with Detroit, those are just things that happen.
Yep.
But the Twins do have a nice history as far as that type of athletic player. You can call it, 5'2", whatever you want to call those type of players. And I think that the Twins have been smart where they really haven't overly tried to change too many things. They kind of let these guys develop. I think, a guy like Kirby Puckett gets to the big leagues and really hadn't shown any power whatsoever as a minor league player, as in his rookie season, and was a tremendous hitter. And the power just was a natural part of his progression as he got more experience at the big league level. So
kind of like Doge.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, we're just, I think they've done a good job. I think the Twins know how to develop. They do trust their staff. They give them a lot of room to do their thing. One of the fun things last year for me was getting back to the minor leagues here with the Twins. I got a chance to get to know some of these new staff that we brought on, some of these young guys that come from different backgrounds, and they're making an impact, and they're definitely helping the organization, mature their minor league system.
Greg, you want to bring us back to the 90s here?
Yeah, I just wanted to, your career is unbelievable. And I was always afraid to talk to you about hitting and what you were doing because I figured you were going to get into my brain at some point. And then I was going to cease functioning every time I saw you. Let's go on to the 39-game hit streak in 87. You obviously in the zone. What were you thinking going through? I mean, was it just that easy?
Yeah. Well, actually, that takes us back to the pre-90s era.
That's okay.
One thing I find is that older I get, it's hard to gauge how much interest people have in reminiscing back to the good old days, as we say. But, that was just one of those times where, ironically, I had been on the disabled list the first half of the season with a hamstring tear. And I remember working with our hitting coach, Tony Muser, during the All-Star break as I was returning to health and getting ready to come back on the roster once we came out of the break. And, we had just worked out a lot of things. And, things just started clicking right away coming out of that injury time and into the second half of the season. And, I was fortunate. I was leading off. I had some speed. I could bunt. I could find ways to get on base. And before you know it, the consecutive game thing just continued to mount. The Brewer record where I was playing at that time, I think it was 24. And so, there was a little bit of focus around that. And then I was able to get past that number and it kind of quieted till I started getting up to the 30s. And then, I don't know, it's just, I was really trying to focus on not so much keeping the streak alive, that we were trying to find our ways back into the pennant race in early August. And, I kept grinding out hits and we kept winning games. And it was just a really, really fun chapter of my time putting on that Brewer uniform.
Any particular hit game that stuck out during that streak?
Well, Baltimore Orioles, man. Playing in Memorial Stadium, and because of being a leadoff man, I got a fifth at bat in the ninth inning with 2 outs off Tom Niedenfuhr, and I hit a homer. So I think that took it it was 30, 31, somewhere in that range. And if I hadn't been leading off, I never would have got that fifth at bat. And then to hit a home run, I remember Ripken yelling something at me when I was running around the bases. It was a good moment.
Oh man, I just saw Niedenfuhr last week down at a fantasy camp. So I'll have to throw that one at him.
He's got a Minnesota connection too. I think he was born in Minnesota, wasn't he?
Was it really? I don't know.
St. Louis Park. I think it was St. Louis Park.
Well, he had a really nice career, but my other memory of him is Jack Clark taking him deep in that playoff game at Dodger Stadium. So, some of those things that you have to suffer through, as well as the good, the bad, as well as the good, right?
Yeah. So on to your moving from Milwaukee to Toronto, and your numbers in Toronto in 92 are just unbelievable. 332 average, 22 home runs, 111 RBI, 211 hits. Did you feel like you were just surrounded with guys? I know facing you guys in 92, it was like, pick your poison, who you're going to run into.
Yeah, well, you changed teams, and a couple times, right?
Yeah.
And I had never done it, and I thought I was going to be one of those rare guys that had a chance to play for a long time and stay in the same city in the same organization. So when it came time for me to have to make a decision about moving, it was tough. I played 15 years in Milwaukee and going to a new team, and but Toronto, their front office was very welcoming. Obviously, they came after me. I knew that they had a great team. They were coming off winning the year before. And, you just try to find a way to fit in the beginning. It took a while for me to get comfortable, but our team just continued to play well. Right? You got Robbie Alomar, you got a Hall of Famer there. Jack Morris, a Hall of Famer. And, playing with guys like Dave Stewart and Joe Carter and Devon White, and we trade for Ricky Henderson. I mean, we had an unbelievable team, and I hadn't been in the postseason 11 years previous to that, so it had been a long drought for me. And so when we got back in there, found our way through the White Sox, and ended up playing a really talented Philadelphia team before we went on to go ahead and defend that title. That World Series was fantastic, man. I just had so much fun playing in it. I think my first time I played it, I was young and maybe didn't appreciate it maybe as much as I should. So to get back there as a 37-year-old veteran, I made sure to savor every moment and try to take as many visual pictures as I could, including Joe Carter hitting that game-winning home run in Game 6. So
unbelievable. What was it? Well, take you back to Milwaukee for just a second. What was it like playing that close to home for that long? But knowing, hey, I could play for my hometown team, but that's got to be kind of a weird dynamic.
It was a little bit, when you get drafted, obviously there's not a lot of leverage. You kind of go where you're selected. But I didn't know a ton about their franchise. They really hadn't done a lot since the Brewers had come back from Seattle. I did know about Robin Yount because he was about my age, but had already played 4 years in the big leagues.
Wow.
But as far as the geographics, it was nice because, I did have a lot of people, family, friends that could, make a weekend drive down there and check out Brewer baseball. So just had some great teams down there. We talked about the Hall of Famers in Toronto, Milwaukee, Simmons and Sutton and Robin, pretty good group of guys that we had there. Very talented, but it was nice to be close to Minnesota too.
Was the adjustment culturally difficult in Toronto in addition to playing for a new team? I mean, Canada's a different bird. There's no denying it, but was that a big adjustment too? Or what was the main part of the adjustment that took you the longest?
Culturally, it wasn't huge. Obviously, you do feel a little bit different when you get into Canada than you do playing your games in the States, but it was pretty easy integration for me. Over time, just getting used to, for one, the year I went up there, we drew 4 million fans. We were the first team ever to do that. So when you do the math, the average 50,000 a game for 81 games at home. It was an incredible environment, but there was really nothing overly culturally different. Maybe the food tastes a little different, and your iced tea is unsweetened and some of that kind of stuff. But mostly, hey, we great following up there, great ballpark to play in, and obviously a really talented team.
And pretty big shoes to fill at another Minnesota boy. From Winfield to you, that's a pretty impressive transition.
Yeah. just for a refresher for people listening, Dave Winfield went up there and won the World Series in '92, and then he left, and I went up there and filled that DH role, and then we won again. So I think it's pretty ironic how Dave and my careers had so many parallels.
Yes.
We grew up 5 blocks apart,
Yeah.
and we both kind of started our career and stayed in one place for a long time. We both went to Toronto to win our first World Series. We both came back to Minnesota to not only get our 3,000th hit, but on the same date. So the paths that our careers took, and the fact that we played on the same playground in St. Paul, I think is pretty amazing.
Unbelievable.
Wow. No, that's really good stuff. What else? I had something for you on the, I wanted to refresh your memory on one. We got to play with each other for about an hour. And
yeah, it wasn't very long.
No, I wasn't very good. And it is what it is. But
by the way, we had TK on last week. I don't know if you knew that, Paul.
I bet you that went really well.
We couldn't get him off the phone. The landline, by the way, the landline.
Yeah, landline.
Probably didn't have to ask too many questions.
No, we just got him started, and it was great. Wind
him up and let him go.
I got to tell you, I got to know TK obviously when I came back here to play, and I played for him for 3 years. I always found him really refreshing in how he thinks about the game and how he learned how to, handle young players. A lot of people thought he was overly penal towards them, but he had a plan in mind for every player that he managed. In-game stuff was incredible. And I just would sit back. He didn't meddle with me too much. He just kind of let me play, but I kind of saw how he ran that team. And I really feel fortunate that I've been around now for, over 25 years. He's been through a lot. Obviously, you have arguably the greatest manager in Twins history with a couple of World Series on his resume. And very interesting guy to listen to. I know when he does the Twins games a couple times a year on the television, I make sure I tune in because I want to be able to still learn something from the man. So.
Now, Greg, I stole your thunder about '97. Sorry about that.
No, you're all right. What? Give me a TK story, because we kind of ran through it, and I told my last week. I told my first camp with you guys in '97, and I had thrown a pen or something and came walking in and had ice all over, and TK went walking by me, and he had just got done throwing BP, and he had ice almost on his whole upper body. I kind of smirked, and he kind of lit me up a little bit about, the fuck am I laughing about? But give me a TK story.
Yeah. Yes, I'm not the best person to ask for a story. I just, a lot of it kind of melds together, but I don't know. It's not even really a story. I know coming here, he had met with me that winter and had really kind of laid out why he thought the Twins were going to get back into a competitive situation. And just his candor with that. And to be honest with you, I came back here in '96 and we finished close to 500, which was pretty amazing considering we lost Kirby Puck at that spring training.
Yep.
But I don't know. I just had the picture like everybody else, him throwing BP with a cigar in his mouth and just
the Zubas.
The Zubas going, yeah. And I don't know. It was just really a privilege. I love all my managers, and they were all different in their own ways. But that chapter of playing for TK was pretty special.
Yeah, good man. Really good man.
One of my favorite stories from when you were a manager, and I know we're going back into the 2000s, was I don't know if you were coaching first for a minute there or what, but one of the players asked you if you had played before. I think it might have been Carlos Santana.
What?
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite stories you ever told.
So that year I was coaching for Gardy, and I can't remember exactly the circumstances, but I had to go out and coach first base for a while. There was a pitching change, and Carlos Santana was playing first base, and I can't remember who was on base for us, but I kind of crept in there and we started conversation. And Carlos asked me, we were talking about something about the game in the past, and he goes, "Did you play?" And I can't remember who was on base for us. Just couldn't stop laughing. And I said, yeah, I played a little bit. And I said, in fact, I played with your manager, Terry Francona. And he says, who? And I said, your manager. And I'm telling you, that story spread like wildfire, because every team almost that came in the rest of the year, when they get on first base, they'd ask me about if I played. And somehow the Carlos Santana story got around. And it's funny because ever since that, I really like that guy. And he's really had a nice career, but he's always been apologetic about it. I said, you don't need to apologize. I mean, we all come and go at some point. So, but yeah, everybody needs a little humble pie once in a while. So that was good for me.
Yeah. I wanted you guys to sign him back in the day, and it never really panned out, but I love guys that can get on base like that. Sorry, Greg, I'm stealing your thunder about the 90s here.
No, that's all good. Like I said, I never talked to you about hitting, because it just, I figured I was going to be bouncing around and never got a chance to just discuss your theories on hitting. You hit, 225 runs, but when I'm facing you, you were always a threat. I was well aware that you could take me out. When you did go deep, were you looking in? You just get mistakes? What I mean, well, I never wanted to go in on you, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, first I'll say, don't. I appreciate your humility towards your own career, but not a lot of people were too happy when they had to have a bat against you, man. You had a lot of weapons, so I think generally, you kind of develop a hitting philosophy without even really having to verbalize it. It's just kind of things that you learn and you adjust along the way. I found out early on when I was playing that, I got tired of chasing hard breaking stuff, whether it was splits or sliders with 2 strikes, and hitting a little bit more out of a panic mode. And I just knew that I had to figure out a way to see the ball a little bit longer. And I started incorporating, as little movement as possible, took my stride away, and just really try to give myself an extra couple of clicks to see the pitch and recognize it. And, it started to work, and I became so comfortable with that approach that I ended up, incorporating it into my entire hitting, whether it was first pitch or 0-2. I just, maybe gave up a little power by doing that, but I think it allowed me to be more consistent. And the other thing I think that I try to pass on with these guys, everyone today is trying to find ways to hit doubles and homers. And I don't know if there's so much sitting on pitches that they just kind of have zones that they don't change their swing much, no matter what the pitch is. But I think you have to learn, I always looked at counts in connection to percentages. When you have favorable counts, your percentages to be able to look for pitches goes up, because the consequence isn't going to directly be an out. And I think people that can execute a little bit more according to the count and understanding what they're trying to do is a big part of it. But yeah, as far as my philosophy, I don't really try to teach other people about it. Guys that do strike out a lot and don't have a lot of power, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So we try to short them up. And part of that is maybe minimizing whatever movement that they have before they go ahead and fire their trigger.
So go ahead, Brandon.
If
you're going to stay on this, I don't want to take it away from you.
No, I just always felt like I was going into your strength by pushing you away.
Last thing I'll say, I kind of didn't answer that. The middle in thing, I didn't have a big power zone. I didn't hit a lot of homers, but I mixed them in here and there. Mostly because I wasn't trying to think about hitting a homer. As today's players, I think they think about it almost every at bat, the majority. So, but I did have, if I was looking middle in, and I could handle velocity in there, but it just wasn't my overall approach for the most part. I like to look out and over and be able to react in there.
Go ahead, Brandon.
When I was watching some World Series film, I want to say, I don't remember what year it was. I think you had done some videos breaking down pitchers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And I think it was for CBS. How did that all come together?
I think it was actually the Twins year, their first
87. Yeah.
87. Yeah. Because, I had gotten a little bit of notoriety because that hitting streak picked up a little steam, and that was in the second half of 87. And so, I don't know, I think it was ABC, because I know that, Al Michaels was in there, and they just, I think Tony Gwynn did some stuff for the National League, and I did some stuff for the American League, and they just asked us to talk about basically they give you a little camera shot and you break down a picture, talk about his repertoire and what made him good or what made him vulnerable. And you try to, give a little commentary in that regard. It was good experience for me.
Yeah.
The one thing that I got the most grief was that I picked the Twins to lose in the first series against the Tigers, I think it was. So I had to kind of live that down for a while. But it was fun doing that little bit of commentary.
Well, they won 29 road games that year. I don't think it was that big of a deal for you to pick against them. That was an against all odds Twins team.
Got hot at the right time. That's for sure.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
Growing up, who was your favorite player? We had that asked on Twitter.
Yes.
Yeah, Greg, I grew up right here in the Twin Cities, St. Paul side of the river here. And I followed the Twins as much as any kid could follow a major league team at that age, considering I think only about 50 games a year were televised. But Harmon Killebrew was my guy. I mean, we had some great teams. The Twins had a World Series appearance in '65. Got shut out by Koufax in Game 7. But, and Harmon just was somebody that you tried to emulate in your backyard. I think I had a number 3 T-shirt. And I always tell people, I said, how many people, boyhood heroes, turn out to be friends in adulthood? And that's about as good as it gets. And I picked a really good guy to look up to because, one of the ultimate gentlemen I ever met in the game. I
called that, Greg. I called it when we were talking off the air. I said it's going to be Harm Killebrew for sure.
Yeah.
Good.
I could tell you a lot of the players on that team, whether it was Tony Oliva or Bob Allison, Earl Batty, Camilo Pascual, Jim Cott. I mean, those were, MVP, Zoilo in '65. So, Mudcat.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I got to meet Harmon once, I think, at a card show. And like you said, one of the nicest, most pleasant people I've ever been around. And it was just an absolute pleasure.
Very genuine. No doubt about it.
So at what point in your career did you think playing in Minnesota was realistic? Because, I mean, we all know the limitations they were dealing with budget-wise. Probably in your peak, you would have priced out of that. But when did it become reality? And then what was that process in the winter of 95, 96 like for you from a recruitment standpoint?
Yeah. In your back of your mind when you play that, you had your favorite team as a kid and you wondered if that would ever fall into place. The longer I played Milwaukee, the more I thought it was unlikely just because like I said earlier, I thought I was going to be there forever. I lost one opportunity. My first time going through free agency was when the collusion was a part of the game and not too many players were changing teams. And so that chapter kind of came and went. I stayed in Milwaukee, which I was very fortunate to do. And then my first free agency period where I had a chance to move was between 92 and 93. And the Twins weren't in position to I was a fit for them at that time. So when I went to Toronto, I figured pretty much that was going to be the end of any hopes of someday, putting on the Twins uniform. But I had some good years and I was still playing pretty well as I got close to 40. I never would have guessed that my first year as a Twin would be the year that I turned 40. I mean, that just wasn't part of how I thought about it. But better late than never. Got a chance to come home. All the people that traveled around for, almost 2 decades watching me play now could just hop in the car and come down to the Metrodome. And it was good, and I didn't come here just because of that. I really thought the team was going to have a chance to be competitive. I was really looking forward to playing for TK. I was really looking forward to having Kirby Puckett as a teammate. Obviously coming home was a positive in that decision as well. But I got a chance to play for them for 3 years and also start the foundation, which has been a relationship now that has spanned over a couple of decades.
Yeah. And you guys won 78 games that year and without Kirby. What was the ripple effect like though? He comes up in spring training and he can't see, the dots or whatever. And then, he got hit by Denny Martinez to end last year, but I think it was the opposite side. The mushroom cloud that came out of that, I have to imagine was pretty immense. What was that like to live that up close and up front?
Well, I think, for the Twins fans and certainly his teammates, you know, your first thought isn't how it's going to affect the team. Your first thought is, you know, you're empathizing with Kirby, right? I mean, you know, you always hear coaches and people say, you know, always play every game like it's your last because you never know what's going to happen. And he literally was that guy where the day before, you know, raking, he just was having a good spring early on. And then literally one day you wake up and you're never going to play the game again. So it was tough. It was tough. It was emotional for everybody to watch him do that. And yet he found a way to stay positive. I never really saw any time where he just said, you know, that he got screwed or I can't believe this happened. He stayed optimistic because there was hope for a while that either was going to come back or be good enough to play. Obviously that never happened. But I remember that year playing and him being around the team and, you know, having that patch on his eye and just, it was tough. It was tough seeing a guy as vibrant and as important to a team as that guy was to all of a sudden have it just pulled away like that.
Well, and then you hit 340 plus 341, I want to say. What clicked for you that year? I mean, 30 or late 30s, early 40s, and you're hitting 341. I mean, come on, man.
Yeah, you know, it was funny because I became pretty good friends with Ron Coomer, who had come over here, and he tells a story that, you know, I ended up having a good year, right? I think I played 161 games or whatever, and produced fairly well. And Coomer tells everybody that he sat next to me in spring training. We locked it next to each other. And I was coming off a little bit of a shoulder ding there from Toronto. And I couldn't hit anything in spring training. And he was telling everybody, he's calling his buddies from LA, this guy's done. He's got nothing left. And, you know, I don't know. I just, I got off to a good start. I think I hit 400 in April and just was able to kind of keep it going. And, you know, the fun part about that year, you know, obviously we didn't win as much as I was hoping, but I'll always remember because someone told me you need 211 hits to get to 3,000. And I'm thinking, well, 40 years old, it's probably not going to happen this year. You know, put that on the back burner. It was never really a ultimate quest of mine to get to that number, but I couldn't have imagined that in my first year back in Minnesota that I'd have the health. TK put me in the lineup every day, that I would get to that milestone on that given year. So yeah, it was a good year. Not a lot of power, had a lot of opportunities. You know, Chuck Knobloch had an unbelievable year.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, you know, stealing bases. You know, I think he hit 340 too. You know, Rick Becker had a really good year. Marty Cordova had a really good year. I think we were, you know, very competitive with runs scored in the league, and that was after losing our best player in spring training.
Not bad. Yeah. I think Kirby had hits off Maddox and somebody else the days before. And that was kind of the raw part of it was he was really swinging it good too.
He was rolling. We were, you know, I'd only been around him. I don't know how, what was it? Maybe 3 weeks into spring training. Yeah. And, you know, you kind of, everybody knows Kirby, but, you know, knowing him from the other side and then knowing him in your own locker room, I just was as much as I tried to imagine what it was be like in his energy. I mean, coming in there every morning with those bags of Egg McMuffins and just immediate announce his presence by calling somebody out in some fashion. It was a spectacular experience. And I know that we were just so excited about what that year might bring before everything came down for him.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he was one of my favorites as a opposing players. Just, you know, he looked like it was just fun, you know.
Probably not as a pitcher, though.
No, I mean, you couldn't throw you know, he was Vladimir Guerrero before Vlad. He was Vlad, you know. I mean, you couldn't throw the ball in the air and not, you know, it not having a chance to get hit really hard.
Yeah, you know, I tell you one thing, when I played against him, I hated playing third base on the turf. You know, I mean, he could hit rockets, you know, him, Winfield, those kind of guys. It made this position scary. And I don't know about you, Greg, but I remember like when I was on Milwaukee and Kirby'd come out to stretch and we you know, or get ready for, he'd go up to all of our pitchers, you know, and he wouldn't call them by their first name. He called them all Mister. And he said, man, I hope you don't get in the game tonight. I got no chance against you. And just totally setting up all these guys, you know, they're all, and then, you know, he'd go out there and he'd make everybody. I had a chance to be watch one of his greatest games in his history.
I was just going to ask you about that. 87, right?
Yeah, he went 6 for 6 with 2 doubles and 2 homers, man. I should have had a toll booth for him coming around third, because it was an all-day event. And what I remember is his last hit was I'm pretty sure I'm right, with Dan Plesac.
I think you're right.
Nasty.
No, Dan Plesac, he was something. And it was in the shadows at County Stadium, which were terrible late in the afternoon. And he hits a homer out to right center. So it was one of those games you don't see very often. Glad I had a chance.
I thought it was just me. Puckett came up to me and was talking to me, and and getting to know him. And I was like, this is really cool. I'm talking to Kirby Puckett sitting around the cage. Now he's just picking my brain, and oh man.
He had ulterior motives, just so you know.
Did you have a favorite defensive position? I know you DH for a long period, but it doesn't have to be the one you were best at. Was there a spot where you were like, yeah, man, I love playing here the most?
Well, I think you'd have a tough time finding one I was best at. I love defense, and I worked at it, but I wasn't as polished as some of the good defenders in the game. I started at short. I moved to second. I played the outfield for a year, and then when back in Milwaukee, Sal Bando and Don Money both kind of were out of the game, and they needed a third baseman, and they brought me back into play. And I had never played it at any level, and it was a learning experience. But the fact that I think I ended up playing there about 10 years. In hindsight, my favorite position. I thought it was super challenging. The cat and mouse game, playing with the hitter. Not that bunting's a part of the game anymore, and just understanding communication with your shortstop. Robin and I, he would have little verbal cues for me as to when he was going to kind of, lean towards a hold, and I lean towards a line. Just playing that position became really fun. And I think of all the places I played, that was my favorite.
How much prep work did you do for the plate? Studying pitchers, going through film. It's testing my recollection a bit, but when I first came up, you had your hitters meetings where you would talk about the other pitchers. We didn't have a ton of information like they have today. Over time, during my playing days, it got a little bit better, but it was more of just about, percentage of fastballs, first pitch, scoring, men in scoring position. Did they change their patterns, things like that. I think most of the prep work I did was trusted my own intuition and recollection. I did use some of that stuff, but and not from a bold school way, but if a pitcher throws, 70% fastball first pitch and 30% off speed, if you're like hitting third in the lineup, you're probably going to get the smaller number of those two percentages. I mean, so you kind of had to learn to judge whatever information you had according to, either what kind of hitter you were, or, obviously they're going to throw the better hitters maybe a little bit more variety or change their most general pattern. So you kind of have to learn that. But the prep work was mostly, I tried to take my approach that I was going to have against that night's starting pitcher into my batting practice. So I would change a little bit how I would prepare, given what I thought was going to be my best chance to get some hits in that particular game. Go ahead,
I don't want to steal anything from Gregg here. I got 2 more if you guys both have time for that, in addition to whatever Gregg's got.
Yeah, go.
You doing okay on time?
Yeah, I got a couple minutes.
Okay, Brett Bowe, a friend of mine, wants to know, Paul, favorite old ballpark to play in, one that may not be open anymore.
I always thought, Fenway's still open, and it was my favorite. I mean, some of the older parks that aren't there anymore, they maybe had some interesting aspects to make it enjoyable to play in. For one, it's a big league stadium, but
right.
I think as a kid, Fenway, whether it was on television or just the way they built up the Green Monster and all those kind of things made it special to play in. And when I had a chance to experience it at the big league level, fans are on top of you. It's definitely not symmetric. I mean, you got different dimensions, you got different things that can happen. You got the triangle out in right center, the short pole in right, the big wall in left. That was by far my most favorite park of playing on the road.
I love it. And then the last one I have, and we'll see if Greg's got one more too. Take us through managing Joe Mauer, because from my point of view, we didn't get a lot from Joe. He'd give us the answers, he'd answer the questions, but he was pretty tight-lipped, whether it was personality or professionalism or just a competitive advantage. But what was it like being the skipper when Joe Mauer was on the team?
I'm very grateful I had a chance to manage him. Gregg, Joe and I went to the same high school in St. Paul, and so my old teammate was Joe's high school coach. So I saw Joe play in high school. I knew Joe forever, and I was part of the development team when he was coming through the system. So, watching him kind of get his career going while Gardy was managing, and then have a chance to kind of be there for the tail end of it. He didn't need a lot of managing. Most conversations were about trying to keep him, being transparent about how we could get the most out of him, as far as keeping him fresh and all those kind of things. I think one thing people underestimate with Joe, because of his quiet demeanor and composure when he's asked questions, win, lose, good game, bad game, is just how competitive he was. Because if you just watch him and his mannerisms, and it doesn't really come out that way, but deep inside, ultra. And I think that he was shortchanged on that particular part of his makeup. But it was great. He was a little bit different player at the end. He had a couple of years there, MVP year, showed a little power in the old Metrodome. But still, if I needed a hit, and I tried to put him in positions in the lineup where I thought he'd get opportunities to where getting a base hit might mean the difference of scoring and not scoring. And more times than not, it was a good choice for me to put him in those roles. And
it must have been cool, that last game where he caught that last pitch from Matt Belisle.
Yeah, I wish I could take credit for that. I actually, Derek Shelton, who was my bench coach, came to me and said that some of the people were talking about the possibility of Joe coming out there for, put the gear on. And obviously we got Joe involved and we tried to figure out how to make it work. I didn't know how it was going to play to the fans I knew that he wasn't actually going to catch, but, and it was that going to make it seem weird, but everyone, the consensus was that this is what we were going to do. And it was a moment, man. I was standing up at my top step in my usual perch, and just to watch people respond when he came walking out of that dugout, there was more than a few people that, shed a tear in that particular moment. And it was just very, very fitting way for Joe to end his remarkable career that someday will hopefully end him up in Cooperstown.
Yeah, I still get chills thinking about it. Greg, what do you got?
I got one last one for you. Unbelievable career, Paul. What's the one thing that you're proudest of?
Man, I don't, I think I've probably been asked that, and I wouldn't be surprised if I've given different answers. I think being able to play at the highest level until I was 42, that's one thing. It takes a heck of a lot of work to play the game when you're young and your body's rejuvenates fairly easily. It's a whole nother thing when you get to be into your early 40s. And I think that combined with, we mentioned it a little bit earlier with Byron Buxton, whatever it was, 13 times the disabled list. There's a lot of times where you kind of hope that you're going to, find good health and good production in the game. And I think the fact that I was able to kind of persevere through some of those challenges and still go on play as long as I did. So I think those are some of the things. Obviously, winning a World Series and all those things, they're all fantastic. Being in the Hall of Fame, I mean, I don't know how many people play to go to get to the Hall of Fame. It's just kind of something that happens. But I think playing long and overcoming a lot of adversity were probably a couple of things that I would point to. So,
well, I honestly, it was a pleasure playing against you. Didn't enjoy the confrontations at the plate all the time, but
yes, you did. Yes, you did. That's what we were all made to do. I
think he was 2 for 13 too. So
what?
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
Oh, I told Gregg in a text the other day. He said something about didn't like facing me, and I said, I don't have a great memory, but I know that the results weren't particularly good on my side. So
2 for 13 with a punch out, no walks.
You know, I laughed the one time, you know, after I left Minnesota, I went to Kansas City, and we were sitting there and we were playing in the Metrodome, and I'm trying to go in at the hands and left it. I got it up a little bit, but you were diving out across the plate. Now you ended up buckling back, and you came walking up the next day and you were like going, that was on me. I was so diving across the plate, you know, and then you went walking off. And I think I was sitting with Mark Gubazar or something, you know, during stretch. And I went, he is so in my head right now. I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do tonight. Now I'm like, do I go back in, or does he know that I'm going there? I'm like, oh, I'm just absolutely, he is so deep in my head.
That's funny. Good story. Man. Good old Mark too, man.
Yeah, he was one of our guests before.
Well, you know, my short story there is that I broke his leg with a line drive in the Metrodome.
You mentioned that too.
Yeah. And
he was supposed to be traded that day.
There might have been about 800 people at that game. So the sound that thing made when it hit his, it kind of reverberated through the whole Metrodome. That was a bad moment. So. Yeah,
he was going to be traded after that game.
He was?
That's what he told us. Yeah, he was going to be traded, I think, to the Yankees.
Yeah.
But we won't keep you any longer here, Paul. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it half as much as I did. Same to you, Gregg. Paul, hopefully we can get you on another time, because there's a whole notepad of stuff I didn't get to. Sure. But thank you so much for not only this today, but the great relationship that we had in 2015 and on. I appreciate everything you did as a manager. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me, man. It's always good to talk the game. You guys do well.
Yes, you too. All right. So for Paul Molitor, Gregg Olson, this is Brandon Warren signing off, saying thank you so much for checking out that 90s baseball pod powered by Access Twins. We'll catch you next week. And we may have a Hall of Famer coming soon. Catch us later. Peace.
Thanks, Molly.